the Woodpreneur Podcast, where sawmill owners and lumber entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Every week, real stories from the timber industry, whether you're starting small or running a big operation. Subscribe for real stories and insights from the industry.
Welcome back to another new episode of the Woodpreneur Podcast. I'm your new host, Jennifer Alger, and we have on the podcast Cody McKee of Mountain Milling Company. And we're going to be talking through how they got started, their family business, maybe some struggles that they've had along the way, and some of the next things that they're looking to do for growth. And so we're gonna be talking through all that. So stay with us and welcome, Cody. How are you doing today?
Doing good. How are you this morning?
Great. I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for asking. So Cody, give the listeners just maybe a few sentences background about your business, kind of how you got started, what your specialty is, and what you do.
So we're a little different. We started out as a lawn company. We were a lawn service. And when we were finally, you get to the point where you're trying to find stuff to keep guys busy during the winter. And
Did you say lawn business, like lawn care, mowing?
Yep.
Okay. So you were a lawn business. Okay.
Yeah, we were a lawn business, and we've been a lawn business since 2001. And our biggest thing was, how do you keep guys busy during the winter? And we always tried different things. And I want to say in 2017, that fall, we bought our first little Norwood sawmill. And we're like,
Okay.
you know what? We've got this really great location. We've got this great warehouse building. Let's see how we can, if this works. And we kind of started as just like, we're going to cut some boards and we're going to do some crafty stuff and move it into flea markets. And we were cutting Eastern Red Cedar, and the flea market thing just wasn't our fit. And so we just started sawing lumber and selling lumber out of our warehouse there.
And Eastern Red Cedar is the only wood that you're milling right now?
Oh, that's predominantly what we do. There just happens to be a lot of it in our area. And in our area, not only is it prevalent, but it's been now labeled as an invasive because it's so thick. The big issue they have with Eastern Red Cedar, and the Mid-South and the eastern part of the prairies, is that it is starting to choke out prairie habitat.
Oh, okay.
Because it is, and you talk to different organizations, they refer to it as the Green Glacier. And so right now, that's always the big push, is they're trying to shrink the Green Glacier because it's encroaching into what used to be grassland habitats. And it's really been rough on pollinator habitats and things like that because, a cedar tree, it just completely blankets the ground underneath it to where nothing can grow in that spot.
Yeah. So we have cedar out here in California. We have Western red. We have several different species of cedar. So yours is Eastern red, right? How big do those get? Ours get massive.
See, and that's the thing with Eastern Red, is they aren't huge trees. There are some large specimens across the country that are getting to like 80 and 90-inch diameters.
Okay.
But that's really, really rare. For us at our mill, if you see a really large tree, you're talking about, maybe 50 feet tall and maybe 25 to 27-inch diameters at 4 foot high. So they're not huge trees.
Okay. Yeah.
So when we talk about Eastern Red Cedar, a lot of people are familiar with, cedar chests.
Right.
And a lot of time a cedar chest is that aromatic cedar that they would use to line closets and use in cedar chests to protect clothing.
Okay. Interesting. So where does most of your cedar go? Where does?
So it all kind of varies. We ship quite a bit around the country anymore. A lot of it's, still going out here locally. Our big thing right now is tongue and groove for ceilings and walls. Still a lot of people using it traditionally as a closet liner, but porches and patios, barn dominiums are huge for us right now. And, we'll go everything from people picking it up here locally to where I've got a full semi load going to Florida tomorrow. And so it's kind of all over the place right now.
Yeah. And so how many people are at your business? And is it family? Do you have a bunch of employees? Tell me a little bit about that structure.
So my dad is kind of the centerpiece of the equation. He started the company when I was 13 as a lawn service. And then I've got my brother that works with us and my brother-in-law. And those two, my brother and brother-in-law, they are really the technical side of the milling operation. I am the mouthpiece. So when we get into, radio spots or stuff like that, I'm the one that, I'm not the face of the organization, but I am the voice a lot of the time because that's my brother-in-law who's like, you asked me to be on the podcast with you, and it kind of make my stomach a little bit uneasy just thinking about it. So, technically those are the sawmill guys. I still work on the lawn side a lot, but my brother and brother-in-law are running the mill. My dad's kind of bouncing back and forth. We have several part-time guys that are just the best. They're either retired or semi-retired. They're working inside the mill with us, like anywhere from 10 to 25 hours a week. A lot of those guys were either family friends or former customers that kind of ended up coming into the sawmill as employees. Uh, we've got one guy he's in his 40s probably and works 2 days a week, runs a bit side business. And we've got two full-time dedicated sawmill operators. And then the one benefit we also have is we have a full lawn service crew as well. So when it rains, the days like today, we've got almost 8 inches of rain the past 4 days. So, we've got stuff for the lawn guys to do around the mill. And during the winter, that's how we keep the lawn guys busy, is we stockpile stuff during the winter and start doing this different stuff like that.
Okay. Okay. Wow. You're probably jealous to know that we sat by the pool yesterday.
Well, my kids were in the pool yesterday, but it was also
But it was
active
raining.
They're
Okay.
like, hey, it's Memorial Day weekend. We're going to go play in the pool anyways.
So it's a hot rain. Okay.
No, it was like 60 degrees yesterday. It was chilly and my kids are insane, but they were
They're
having a
just
blast.
serious. They're serious.
Yeah, we weren't going to stop them. So
Yeah. So it's kind of a family run business. Kind of, how do you, I grew up in a family run business. That's my family behind me there, that my dad and my siblings, Cody, Jason, Michelle, and I. So yeah, we grew up in that, and people always ask us, how do you do it? How do you work with your family all the time? And we love it. But how do you guys feel about it?
we're the same way. And that's, I get out into public and I tell people that I work with my dad. My dad's my boss. They're like, man, that must be terrible. And I'm like, no, it's literally the best thing. And that's really the thing I feel like sets our company apart from anyone else is, we have a really solid family core that we built everything around. And our staff knows that, our end goal is to support the family and their families.
That's
It's just so special to really have that, to where my dad is in his mid-60s now and is semi-retired, and he's gone. He'll leave and go to Alaska to fish for 3 months during the summer to get out of the heat.
good
I
for
mean,
him. Good for him.
and
I
that's
just
just
love
the best thing. Yeah, that's the best thing for him to be able to leave and know that everything's fine. He doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to think about it. We keep him in the loop with what's going on. We'll consult with him if we have questions or, things that we want his opinion on. But outside of that, he's going to leave at the end of June. He's going to come back at the end of September and he's, going to get to enjoy being gone.
That's wonderful. Love that. Love that. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So Cody, so the family's not a big struggle for you. That's actually one of the benefits. It is for us as well. I think it's huge. What are some of the struggles? Like, what is the biggest obstacle that you run into on the day-to-day grind or the day-to-day running of your business?
So the thing over the past several years is it always seems like we're running into a new bottleneck. And kind of working through what's the bottleneck, what's the place that's keeping us slowed down.
Yeah.
And when we first started, we were just running the saws, and then we added the molder planer, then we added a resaw, and then in 2022 we added a kiln, where we could actually dry all of our stuff.
Right.
And so it's like this constant, you're just chasing your tail of, where's the new spot now that we need to address? Last year, or actually, I guess in 2023, it was the resaw. We had a single head resaw. It was gas powered. It was the best thing in the world for us when we got it. But it just wasn't, fitting us anymore. So we upgraded first of last year, really put an investment into our business and said, hey, we're going to build a new saw house. We're going to get a new resaw, and we're going to have, 2 sawmills running full time, and the resaw and the kiln. And then now the thing is, we're going through logs so much faster. So now it's okay. How do we get logs in on a regular basis? So it's just, you know, it's if it's not one thing, it's another, and it's always just trying to track down, okay, how do we address the newest issue?
Hmm.
And that's the strength of having, all four of us running the company together is, having those different mindsets and opinions. My brother is really analytical. My brother-in-law is super creative, and my dad kind of operates in his own realm. I like to say he's just
Dads do
his
that.
mind. He's trying to think. He's never been in the box in his life. He's just outside the box all the time. So that's, putting all that together makes a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. Being able to think outside the box is huge. I'm not a systems and process person, so those layouts, and making things flow, I don't see them naturally, but I've been out on these industrial meets out at different sawmill sites before, where somebody from one of Wood Miser's industrial team, or they'll even fly people over from South African industrial team. They'll go out and they'll walk through these layouts, and they'll look at something and they'll go, if you move that resaw there, extend your material handling here, put a little green chain there, do an incline. And I'm like, wow, I didn't think of that. It's amazing. So people who can think like that, it's very fascinating. And I wish I was one of them, but I'm not. But yeah, having different people on your team who can think outside the box and figure out, do you need a live roller here? What do you need to do with your material handling? That's huge. That's huge. So what does a normal day for you look like? You get to the mill. How does your day go?
So, when you talk about running two different companies, as a business owner, you're wearing a lot of different hats. Well, I'm literally wearing different hats, depending on the day. Because, there's some days I'm in the sawmill all day taking phone calls and doing sales. My split really is marketing and sales. I handle most of our Facebook and social media. I handle most of our marketing spend and ad spend, then just replying to all the different messages we get from people. So that's, kind of my role inside the company is, I rarely touch a piece of wood unless I'm handing it to a customer.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
my brother-in-law is very, very hands-on. He
Mhm.
is, our operations manager is kind of the role he plays, especially with the saws. And, he's out on the resaw, he's out on the sawmill, he does all of our kiln operations. My brother is our, finance guy and handles all of our book work. And my dad is kind of our floater. So, it's just, we've got that ability to split up all that work. But for me, today it's rainy and cloudy. When we get done here, I'll go back to the mill. I'm trying to work on a new Facebook ad campaign, try and tweak some stuff a little bit. And tomorrow, once the sun's back out, I'll be back on the lawn side doing chemical applications in people's yards. So it's a lot of bouncing back and forth.
So your lawn service does the weed control as well.
Yep. Weed control and landscape and everything. And it's just, one of those things. The running joke for us is, we used to be a lawn service that owns a sawmill, and now we're a sawmill that owns a lawn service.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
you know, it just, you can't do one or the other. It's got to be both things full time. We really thought that the sawmill was going to be this seasonal thing that we could do through the winter. And the more we did it, we're like, oh no, the summers are busy season at the sawmill too, because everyone's working on the projects.
Yeah.
So now we're still like, we reported like 8 years into owning a sawmill and still trying to figure out how do we keep the lawn guys busy during the summer or during the winter, I guess.
Or during the winter. Okay. Okay. 8 years in. So there's a lot of talk about tariffs, and I know we get a decent amount of cedar in from Canada. How do you feel that that's going to affect your business, or have you already felt some of the?
So for us, all of our cedar is local.
Right.
all of our stuff is coming from within 2 hours from us. All of our logs are coming from within 2 hours of us. Most of our equipment, we run Woodmiser mills. So, all of our parts and everything are coming from inside the US. We haven't seen a whole lot of it. For us, we're kind of looking at the upside.
Yeah.
When some of that foreign lumber, some of the Canadian stuff starts to become a little bit more expensive, it'll go back. What we're hoping is that some of the lumber prices go back to what they were during COVID, because we were
It was insane.
able
It
to
was
put out a
insane.
really, really good product at a third and half the price of what the lumber yards were.
Right.
And with our location where we at, in our town, we set in what we refer to as the lumber triangle, because, Lowe's is in front of us and Home Depot's to our left. And so there's the three places, there. And when they were really hurting and when treated lumber was really hard to come by, that was a major boom for us. And it was one of those things that, our business, didn't struggle during COVID. We took off.
Yeah,
That
I
was,
think everyone in the wood industry took off and exploded during COVID. It was sad that was the reason behind it, but it was, you couldn't have asked for better financial circumstances for those in the wood business, and not to downplay what some of these other poor businesses and families were going through at all, but wow, it really was. Now, you'd mentioned something a second ago about pressure treated. Are people looking at cedar as kind of the next best thing to pressure treated because of its rot and bug resistance? Is your cedar, because it's relatively small, so how much heartwood is really there?
so, most of the Eastern Red Cedar is heartwood. You really only get about a 1 inch to 2 inch ring of sapwood around the edge of it.
Okay.
So our whole process, we aren't cutting big wide stuff, right?
Okay.
We stop at 12 inches wide. That's it. And even on our 12-inch stuff, we don't go over 8 foot. You just end up with too much waste off of it. Cedar trees aren't big to begin with, and they taper really hard.
Okay.
So, over an 8-foot log, you may have 4 inches of taper from big to small, and sometimes it's more than that. So, you're not just pumping out, 16-foot 1x6s on a regular basis. Our logs come into the mill at 8'8", and so we kind of have to stay inside those parameters. But for like garden beds and outdoor furniture, stuff like that where it's outside and it needs to be able to withstand the weather, posts, it does really, really well. And that's kind of the market that we push to, is this is a natural alternative to pressure treated lumber.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it had the same properties that I assumed it did, but I've never used it, so I didn't know for sure. So great.
So in rock
great.
resistance to Western Red Cedar, they're really comparable. The difference with Eastern Red is it's more aromatic, so it's got more oils and tannins in it, to where it's more insect repellent. It's not insect resistant, it's insect repellent. I know there's companies, there's a company down in Texas that we've seen that they actually market like a cedar pellet for treating yards for insects.
Okay.
Which, that was always the traditional use for aromatic cedar. Eastern Red Cedar was for closet liners and cedar chests for moths, because they do a really good job of keeping insects away from your clothes and things of that nature.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So tell me what one of the biggest struggles in your business. You'd mentioned one of them before. What are some of the things that maybe we could help you with, or the Woodpreneur community could help you with in your business? Maybe some things that are coming up, struggles that you might be having.
For us, one, it's how do we get into distribution? How do we make those relationships and get out, beyond Arkansas? We ship quite a bit, but, unless you're getting, pretty good size order, it's hard to make that cost effective for people. And then the other thing is, as we grow, we're kind of in this phase shift from entrepreneurship to small business to trying to build into that medium-sized business. And waste is going to become a major issue for us. We're working on a 3-acre lot is where our whole mill is operated on. And so we do a really good job of minimizing waste in every way that we can. One of those is we don't ever intentionally cut dimensional lumber until we know it's a stock item or something we've got an order for. Everything is going to cants and then, going out the door as, this or that, as opposed to having just stacks and stacks of, 1 inch or 2 inch sitting around ready to go. We're kind of holding in cant form as long as we can.
Oh.
But, when we get into sawdust and chips off the molder planer and things of that stuff, we've looked at different options and things that may work. We found out that for some reason, Eastern Red Cedar will not pellet from the companies that we've tried.
Okay.
We really wanted to pelletize it and use it for animal bedding.
Yeah.
Something about our molder planer chips. So we sent them to 2 different companies that make the pellet machines, commercial pellet machines, and neither one of them could get it to hold the pellet.
Yes.
So that's the next phase for us is, do you move to a tub grinder and grind all your waste to mulch? How do you do that cost effectively?
Right.
That's the biggest thing because that's, we've always operated fairly, on a low debt, budget. Debt to revenue is 50% of our yearly revenue is what we carry in debt.
Okay.
So, for us going out and buying a $300,000, $400,000 grinder is just obscene.
Yeah.
Especially for our operation.
Right. I wonder if there's a way that you could, and I know you're rural. We talked about that earlier. But I wonder if there's a way that tub grinder could pay for itself because so I told you before, we run a sawmill. So some of the things that we've done with our slash, we looked at getting into our own tub grinder. We looked at, getting into, breaking it down ourselves. And what we ended up doing was we knew some people in the area who had one. And so we would, every so many months, we would have them come out and we would have them grind our slash pile up. And then that would go into these other containers for animal bedding. So once that went in, it would go to animal bedding. And then additionally, we had another company come out and just put their own bins there. We didn't do anything to it. We put in sawdust, slash, all these different things in those. And then those went for animal bedding. None of it was being turned into pellets. It was mixed species in some cases. We did have to keep some species out for some animals because of toxicity, but sometimes we could mix our species. But the tub grinder thing, like one thing is you could do that as a service for others, like the person was doing for us. That's one possibility. Or find someone who has one in the area who does want to come out to multiple sawmills, because the one that we were using, gosh, they probably drove to us maybe 2 hours, but they serviced tons of the different sawmills in the area. So it didn't have to be right there in our backyard, and it still made sense. And then we didn't pay for that service, but they got the chips. So they made the profit off the chip on it, or the mulch. Some other things that we have done, and we haven't done this, at scale because I feel like it takes too much time, and where we can just put it in the bins and the animal people come and get it. We don't spend a ton of time on it, but we've been approached by the beauty industry before, specifically for certain species. If we keep our sawdust separate for redwood, and if we keep, I don't know if if the tannins and the oils in it would be a problem for the beauty industry.
Yeah, who knows?
You could definitely explore that. I would have thought redwood would, because redwood tears me up. I'm allergic to it, even though we mill an awful lot of redwood. But it is what it is. I start to literally lose my voice if I'm around it too much. But the beauty industry has contacted us, and we've sold them quantities of very specific redwood for some beauty. I don't even know what they were putting it in. I don't know if it was a cream or just
a soap, or who knows. Yeah.
I have no idea, but it was definitely the beauty industry. We've had for different species, not our redwoods. This is more in the oaks, but there might be a type of mushroom that will feed off of the redwood. I don't know. But we have mushroom farmers want our sawdust. And then we've had different people with different species of woods, if we can separate our sawdust, that they want it to put around things to kill the weeds because it chokes everything else out. And so just looking at what are the properties within cedar, how we might find as a negative, how could some other industry find that as a positive, and then target them, maybe bag it yourself. The the insect repellent, maybe get some really cool little bags. I don't know if it would have to be open and it touch them to be an insect repellent, but maybe just these little aromatic bags that you sell people to take camping with them.
Well, that's, we've looked at that. We've tried fire starters. We had a bagger for a while. We're bagging as mulch. And that's like the volume issue comes into play. Especially where we're at, locally, you kind of look next door and, see Lowe's has got, that bag of Eastern Red Cedar mulch,
Right.
for $2 a bag. Well, I mean,
Can
she
you
can
imagine
barely buy
that?
the bags for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, the volume really comes into play, and that's where we've tinkered with different stuff. One thing we've looked at is silt socks for
Say that again?
a silt sock.
Silk sock.
Yep.
Okay.
SILT, silt
Yeah.
sock
Yep.
for erosion control on
Right.
construction sites.
Right.
That's something we've looked at. And then someone came back and said, well, you need, bigger, bulkier stuff and not wood shavings, and
Through. Yeah.
because the water needs to be able to flow through. Right. So, it's just kind of running through all those different things. And, you know, I'm waiting for that person to show up and say, hey, we want all of this. We've got a use for it.
Right.
We'll either take it from you or we'll give you a little bit to pay for you guys to load it onto our trucks and get it out of here.
Yeah.
Because we're at that point. We're like, okay, if the marketing takes off, if we push to the right places, Florida has been crazy for us this year. Our two biggest orders ever have been both this year and both out of Florida for barn dominiums.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I keep hearing my son is building a barn dominium in northwest Oklahoma. So yeah.
Okay.
How funny. How funny. Well, maybe somebody will listen to this podcast and go, I could use that, and reach out to you and make the perfect connection. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And and it's one of those things, that person's out there. It's just trying to find the right fit for us.
Right.
And that's the thing with everything we do is, we really wanted to get into some lumber yards too. So we've been approached about some different people, but it's just like, I think that's not where we need to be. We're not where you need us to be yet to supply it. And it's just finding those connections.
Right. Yeah, connections are huge. One of the things that we're working on out here in the West is stop having these mills work in all their silos and work together, collaborate, and then create a market collectively. And I just think we could do so much more together because we have some big mills out here that we're all kind of competing against. And I just think that, why compete alone? Why not partner together? Why not work together and collaborate? And so that's something that we're working on out here. So yeah, very cool. So if they do find you find this great outlet for your sawdust, for your slash pile, for your chips, how will they find you?
So you can find our website. It's www.mountainmillingco.com.
Okay.
We are at Mountain Milling Co. on Facebook, Instagram. We're on Threads and TikTok, and it's all the same everywhere.
Okay.
And then, our best email is sales@mountainmillingco. If you look up mountainmilling.com, you will get a dentist in Washington. So that's not the right one.
Yeah.
So we found out that the hard way we were putting the website together. So
A bummer. All right. Well, do you have any questions for me? Anything that we can help you with?
The one thing I wanted to mention, when we were going through everything is, the one thing we see in a lot of businesses is a lot of people get caught in what we refer to as the debt trap. And you get into this mindset where you have to go out and buy that new machine, and you can't function without it. We've been in business for 8 years now. And the resaw we bought last year was the first piece of new equipment we've ever purchased.
Oh, cool. What'd you get?
So it's a Morgan saw, double head 2-head resaw,
Okay.
3-phase.
Okay.
But we started our first, big saw, what we call, it's not big to most people, but we have an LT40 that we run.
Okay.
And with a
Great mill.
diesel engine, and it, all day for us and has for years.
And it will continue to for years. We've owned many of them.
Well, and that was part of the thing we built the business around was, when they were in short supply, we were finding deals on saws and running them for as long as we needed them to keep up. And then we'd make some money off the saw.
Oh,
And, that was a constant flip process. Um, you know, it's
you
just
mean we
lovely.
were 2 years out on sawmills, that era,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
You'd find one and you'd realize, okay, that's a really good price on that mill. And we need to run another saw for 2 or 3 months here to stay caught up. And then when 2 or 3 months was over, you'd make $10,000-15,000 saw.
On the saw. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it was one of those things that we were finding creative ways to build capital to reinvest back into the company. And, all of our trucks are used. The truck, my personal vehicle is 20 years old, but it runs great. It's in good shape. It's got 140,000 miles on it. I'd much rather be able to spend that money on our employees and stuff for them and pay good people than to have that truck payment sitting around that we're worried about in the winter.
Right, right. No, that's a great point for small businesses is try to do as much as you can without debt. That's and make sure if you do get some debt, make sure that you can service that debt and maybe one at a time instead of financing the whole operation. That's a scary position to be in. And it doesn't give you the
And
flexibility.
these too many people that are just, they're running really good businesses and they're really, great people that get just overrun with trying to keep up, with things. And that just, you see people just getting eaten alive by it. And it's awful to watch.
Yeah.
And that's always the one thing we stress with, even our kids that are coming up into the business is, look, you don't need a brand new vehicle to get to work every day. It's going to be okay. You're going to make it,
That's what I keep
with
telling
this
my
old
guys.
beater car that we found for you. Yeah.
I keep telling my guys that with the forklifts. I'm like, so what? It just needs paint. It's fine.
Oh, our forklift's the first example. We paid $500 for our first forklift.
Mm-hmm.
We still have it. It has 20,000 hours on it.
Great.
And
Great.
we know eventually it is going to just be done.
Yeah.
But, until that day comes, we will run that forklift.
You'll run it.
all day.
Yes. Yes. I like that. That's great. All right. So we're getting ready to wrap up. If there was one thing that you really would want people to know about your business, what would that be?
Everything that I could tell people is that, we want to sell a product that people want to use. And more than anything, our whole business is built around, we are here to serve people.
You are there to serve people.
Undoubtedly. And that's, the one thing I can say that has been the pillar of our business is we have built our business on unrelenting kindness and finding ways to partner with people and watch people grow. And over 20 something years, we've seen a lot of people pop in and out of our business. And, it's so exciting to watch those people move on and do better things. And that's really who we are as a company is we want to find the people that fit us. So it's never been about, let's see how much money we can make. Let's provide for our families. Let's find the companies that suit us, that work best with us, and, that we can help grow as well.
People over profits and unrelenting kindness. I love it. I love it. That's great. Well, Cody, thank you so much for joining today and telling us a little bit about your business. It was great getting to know you. Once again, Mountain Milling Co. on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Threads, and then mountainmillingco.com, correct?
Yep.
All right. Right. Yeah. Go check him out. Thank you so much for listening to the Woodpreneur Podcast. And if you have not yet, go down, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like it, give us a rating. Thanks.